Coming in of a massive grid failure that has taken power out along the East Coast.
So far, we have no confirmation on what is causing this devastating outage, but rumors of a cyber attack are already being mentioned by authorities.
We now have reports that Texas has also lost its power in what appears to be a cascading domino effect. With as many as 100 million people now affected, authorities in the West are bracing themselves as they fear the blackout will continue to spread.
It has been an extraordinary last hour. The entire East Coast went out. Texas followed. Officials confirmed a cyber attack is the most likely cause behind this catastrophic failure. Forgive me, I'm being told right now that Los Angeles, Las Vegas, and San Francisco, they have all gone out as well. It's looking like a total power outage across the entire country.
A colossal and history-making blackout,
the likes of which we have never seen before.
What I'm talking about is a cyber attack against infrastructure, a cyber attack that could affect tens of millions of people for a period of months, if not longer.
Based on your reporting, it seems clear from your book that the national security officials believe that this is a matter of when and not if.
Exactly. In fact, that's a line that a man I came to know when I was embedded with the U.S. forces during the invasion of Iraq. He is now the commander of CENTCOM, four-star general Lloyd Austin, who said exactly that. It's not a question of if, it's only a question of when. We know, I say because the former chief scientist of the NSA told me this, as did Keith Alexander, his boss, who was the director of NSA. We know that the Russians are in the grid. We know that the Chinese are in the grid. It is frightening enough that my wife and I decided we were going to buy enough freeze-dried food for all of our kids and their kids.
In his book, Lights Out, veteran journalist Ted Koppel paints a grim picture of a paralyzing power outage in the form of an all-out cyber attack on the nation's electrical grid.
Who are the potential perpetrators here? Who do we have to fear the most? Is it Russia, China, Iran, terrorists, individual actors?
All those. The interesting thing, Chip, is the ones who are most capable are the ones least likely to do it.
There are some experts who say they're already in.
Oh, they are in.
They are in.
There is no question about it.
They're into our grid.
They are already in the grid. I was told that by the former chief scientist of NSA. He stated categorically the Russians are in, the Chinese are in. The Iranians may be on the verge of getting in. And then at the bottom of the capability scale are folks like ISIS, terrorist groups. I spoke to the two top officials at FEMA. FEMA is the Federal Emergency Management Agency. It would be their responsibility to deal with the consequences of an attack in the immediate aftermath. The deputy head of FEMA, who is a retired Coast Guard vice admiral, told me that, in his opinion, in the event that a city like New York or Manhattan was hit, his response would be to evacuate. I said, evacuate 8 million people? Well, he said, you don't leave me with much of an option. If it happens, you're going to take care. You've got to take care of the people, and the only way I can see you could do that would be to evacuate. The next day, I spoke to his boss and said, what would you do? Would you evacuate? And he said, evacuate? You can't evacuate 8 million people. Where would you put them? So just to respond directly to your question, the two top people at the agency responsible for dealing with the consequences of an attack like this cannot agree on what they would do.
So we turned to Paul Stockton, a former Defense Department official whose duties included cybersecurity.
So what does the average family actually need to be doing? Do they need to be, as Ted Koppel has done, stocking up on water and freeze-dried food?
I think those are very important measures. Average citizens need to be able to take care of their own families and their own neighborhoods and their own communities, and not assume that Uncle Sam is somehow going to magically bring in the cavalry and rescue them.
Are the power companies today prepared to respond to a large-scale cyber attack on the grid?
Power companies today are strengthening their ability to respond to an attack and restore power more quickly.
Still, Stockton admits
their readiness is not where it needs to be, given that the adversary continues to strengthen the sophistication of the weapons that will be used against the United States.
But to have an extra supply of food and water, to be able to take care of your family and to know that you're not dependent upon government sort of running to the rescue, I think that can actually be quite healthy.
Well, having written the book, I should ask you directly, how prepared are you now?
Not as prepared as I should be, but I have bought some freeze-dried food for the family, for myself and my wife and our children and our grandchildren. We do have a water supply, and we do have backup generators. Is that going to be sufficient? I don't know. I hope never to find out, but I fear that I may.
So let's ask you directly, given what you now know about this subject, over the next 10 years, what would you put the likelihood at that something like this will happen?
Well, if I didn't think that it was likely, I wouldn't have written the book in the first place. I think when you say over the next 10 years, I think it's all but inevitable that it's going to happen in the next 10 years. You're talking about a community of, what, 8 million people? The food in a place like Manhattan would run out in a couple of days. New York State has several million MREs, meals ready to eat. But when you take several million and you divide it by 8 million, you're talking about maybe a 2 or 3 day food supply. What happens on day 4?
But you go into considerably more detail in your book, and perhaps you can share some of that with us now. What would happen, in fact, if this did take place?
Well, once you're without electricity, you are without the capability of, particularly if you live in an urban center, you're without the capability of heating or cooling your home. The water supply is going to stop in the sense that it requires pumps which are powered by electricity to get that water into the various apartment buildings, into the flats throughout the city. The worst part about that is not merely the fact that there wouldn't be enough drinking water available, but also the fact that you don't have the capability of disposing of human waste. Within the matter of just a few days, that becomes a major crisis. I spoke to an official of one state that is a rural state, only a few hours' drive from Washington, who told me that the governor had in effect, they did sort of a war game, and they have told the National Guard, the state police, the local sheriff's departments, that what they're going to be doing in the event of something like this, and tens of thousands of refugees coming from Washington, they will be handed a bottle of water, a sandwich, and a map. And the map will show them where the nearest gas station is. And they will be told, I'm terribly sorry, we do not have the infrastructure to support tens of thousands of refugees. And I must tell you that in the final analysis, I came you know, we all have to reach a conclusion at some point or another. When you read the book or when you get other information on the subject, you may reach a different conclusion. I am convinced that this can happen, and I am more or less convinced that at some point or another it's going to happen, in one form or another. It is frightening enough that my wife and I decided we were going to buy enough freeze-dried food for all of our kids and their kids.